I guess I say this quite often, but here's the thing. I wanted to review the Xiaomi Redmi 5 Plus, and I already did, but I never actually planned on reviewing the Xiaomi Redmi 5. But actually it turned out to be quite a good thing, because I got pleasantly surprised, because it's better than I expected it to be. Of course it's nothing amazing, but for this price it actually totally delivers, and by now it's also available as a Band 20 version, which I don't have just yet, but that's good enough. So let's get into the first thing, design and build quality. Yes, and it looks a lot like the Xiaomi Redmi 5 Plus, just a little bit smaller, and that's actually something that I know to appreciate a lot, because this phone is quite nice and easy to use in just one hand. Of course, not all the way up top, because it has, like many phones by now, a 2x1 display. Of course, it's not quite bezel-less, because still at about on top we have them, but really works out well, easy to hold on, it's not too slippery, normal like every other metal phone, nice curves everywhere, and with this kind of part that feels like glued on, it actually gives you enough points to hold on to it, so really nice and easy to hold. Buttons, nice click, very nicely positioned. The fingerprint reader also a very good one as well, because it's very reliable and it doesn't really need all that much to turn on, so definitely above average. The camera though also above the actual chassis, because it sticks out a little bit. We have a headphone jack. We still though have one thing that you don't even get on higher priced phones, IR blaster. Also the microphone, SD card and SIM card tray. And yes, I know this will be a bummer for a lot of people. Yes, this is still using micro USB, and I'm not quite sure if that's something that is so expensive to import into a phone just yet, but these budget phones still don't have that. Otherwise, speaker and of course another microphone. We have an LED, we have some cameras and sensors up here, no capacitive buttons, since we obviously can see on-screen buttons. Bezels, in my opinion, are absolutely nice, and even for those people who usually have a problem with the black border around a white front, this is very small and should not be an issue. The bezels also absolutely in line with most phones these days that have this 2x1 chassis, so overall, gotta say, nice build quality, overall nice in-hand feel, absolutely well done, especially for this price range. Now let's talk about the display here. What we have, and yeah, still not all that flexible, we have the options for warm, standard and cool, but on automatic contrast, because if you use increased, then it also stays the way. Automatic contrast boost the contrast, which I'm not the biggest fan of, because then things just look a little bit weird, but increase is what I would actually prefer, but I'm just gonna leave it as is and talk about it. 490 lux, that is a good average for a mid-ranger especially. Viewing angles are not the very best ones, but still absolutely fine, because if you just use normally some smaller shifts, won't change colors or anything, just dim a little bit. Otherwise, colors I think are actually very nicely done, because calibrated well, and the slightly lack of contrast is for this price, it's absolutely acceptable. So I'm actually pleased with this display, and let's talk about the biggest issue that some people might have. It's just 720p, but I have to say, if I wouldn't have known, and if I wouldn't have looked properly as a reviewer, I would have had no issue with the 720p display, because text and everything else is still absolutely nice and sharp. Of course, not nearly as sharp as a 1080p. Or on Quad HD display, but for this price range, due to the smaller size after all, even though it's 5.7 inches, I was impressed of how well this worked out, because it never became an issue for me, and that's the most important factor. And everything else like whites and blacks are also quite solid. So let's talk about the sound. I have to say, I was surprised the very first moment when I turned the speaker on, because it is actually surprisingly loud for such a, let's say, relatively compact phone. It also sounds quite good, so I would say it's pretty much the same as on the Redmi 5 Plus. Good tonal balance, it's not thin at all, actually almost rich, good quality, doesn't really distort, gets quite loud, so I'm actually fully pleased, same as for the headphone jack that is here at the top, because with the extra settings that we have, of course, on Xiaomi devices, here for headphones with presets and so on, you are covered as well, and it's one of the louder ones with an actual really nice quality. So let's talk about the performance. Kill all apps, and I have to just point that out, this is the 2GB version, which I won't really recommend, because even though it's, I guess, not slower than the 3GB version is in terms of app loading times, which are of course not as fast. If you have a lower end phone or a budget phone, this is mostly where you will notice things, because things just don't load up as quickly. But just get the 3GB version and you should be better, because what you will see here, Actually, it's not a much lag because as you can see here, browser runs smooth, and every app that is once loaded and also cached in a little bit runs actually super nice. So the Snapdragon 450 delivers for a 720p display. This is absolutely no issue, but it is the multitasking which will be a little bit of an annoyance, because once you switch to an app, it really reloads very often, very obvious, and some people might say you can optimize it and so on, but 2 GB of RAM are still 2 GB of RAM, and apps these days just use up more RAM. So no matter what you do with 3 GB, you will definitely be way better off, especially if you plan on using this for a little bit longer. So just keep that in mind. The performance, once loaded and once everything's done, is good. It's just the multitasking, hopping between many apps, that will make it a little bit harder to live happy with this phone. So get the 3 GB version. It's not much more expensive, like 20-30 bucks. Gaming performance is not the very best one. It's actually a little bit below average just because I expected more. So we had some more slowdowns, but it's still fully playable. Now, battery. Charge time I can't really tell you because I completely forgot to check that, and usually it's not that important because this doesn't have any sort of quick charge. So expect around, I would say, roughly 2.5 hours. And battery life was actually really good though, because 6.5 to 7 hours on mobile data, and I would say 9 hours plus on Wi-Fi with a quite good standby drain. And this has to do maybe some things that I have to talk about, because this is actually still running, even though it is available global ROM, this is still running the Chinese ROM. So more bloat installed and just not everything perfect. So some notifications didn't always come in, like on the Redmi 5 Plus, even though they both had the global version. But just keep that in mind. Now there is a global version which pretty much resolves all issues that I would have had, but I didn't really run into. Just some notifications that didn't always come in. But otherwise, no app drawer. For all those people who have an issue with that, just use a third-party one. Or if you want to change the design, because I know a lot of people always complain about the design, also here the quick settings. There is a really nice theming engine, and just make use of it and you will be super happy, because I know it's a little bit of an UI you have to get used to, but since I've used a Xiaomi phone for the last year already, several ones for a longer period of time, I can tell you that you will get used to it. Once you customize it a little bit, you just have to get used to that, because you can change the buttons. You have a lot of extra features here to set up some smaller gestures, shortcuts and so on. Mirror the buttons, hide the floating buttons. You have a full screen mode to make every app compatible with this 2x1. The quick ball, which is a small ball that replaces pretty much a navigation, headphone jack, and a lot of more smaller features. And the good thing about Xiaomi is that they support the device actually for quite a long time. I've heard like 4 or 5 year old devices still getting new versions. So you should be covered here. I know it's not a software for everyone, but believe me, give it a proper chance. Customize it unless you really can't live with it, but you should be fine. Now, Band 20, like I said, is not available on this version, but there is a Band 20 version already. Call quality, I know people are always asking about that. Speaker quality and so on, about when I called, was fine. Absolutely no problems at all. And the other side didn't complain either, so I'm good with that. So let's talk about, not that, but this, the camera quality. And starting off with the selfie camera, I have to say I was extremely surprised by how good it is. Because as you can see here, and it might look a little bit weird. Let me quickly check something. Yes, sorry. I had a filter running, so let's just forget that. Because this is nice and sharp. As you can see here as well, on all distances. Here also, good colors. Shutter time was good. And I'm actually surprised by how good a budget phone camera can be, especially on the selfie side, which some higher end phones don't even get. Of course, inside, especially with shaky hands, I have to say that I had that since I just came out of the cold, can turn out, yeah, a little bit blurry. But as you can see here on this one, absolutely fine. So I'm fully pleased here. Low light, yeah, definitely not all that great. Quite some blur without the flash. With the flash, it gets better. But otherwise, solid budget phone, low light cam. Outside, and yes, still not the best weather. I was surprised by how good the pictures turn out, because shutter times were okay, shutter lag and so on. Autofocus due to the weather had some smaller issues, but I had many phones these days having that. Also HDR, as you can see, does improve a little bit. There is a good toggle by now. Don't have to go into the software because I've talked about it so many times already. And even as you can see, macros turn out quite good. Okay, we don't have any extra features like bokeh and so on, but I think it's more important to have a good main cam or a basic cam instead of having a ton of features. So I'm good with that. Let's check the video quality. You are limited to 1080p though, I have to say. because there is no 4K, not at least compatible. I think it's the chip. And yeah, of course, 1080p doesn't look super crisp and sharp. The autofocus does have some little jump in and out, but it gets the job mostly done. A little bit shaky since there is no optical stabilization or EIS or so. But I have to say still, for this price range, this is still solid enough. So this should not turn out to be the problem. And also the selfie cam actually almost seems better than it was on the 5 Plus, even though it also seems to slightly over sharpen, but colors look fine. The exposure isn't all that bad with some harsh light on my head or on the baldy head. Yeah, this is fine. What I was a little bit surprised by is the microphone when I tried it here indoors, because it sounds a little bit thin, but actually quite clean, quite clear. And with good quality also inside if you have some proper lighting, because as we'll see in a few seconds, and this is a general Xiaomi issue, whenever you go into a dark space where you just don't have good lighting, as you will see here now, the frame rate drops. So this is something that you should definitely keep in mind. But otherwise, I'd say that's it. And let's get already to the conclusion. This phone, I think roughly at around 110, 120 euros with the 2GB version, around 130, 140 euros with the 3GB version, which is pretty much the only one that I would consider. Don't go for the 2GB. Save that little bit money up and you will get something better. And I'm pretty sure once you see this video on a flash sale or whatever else, you will get this phone quite soon, maybe in a month or two already, for very close to like 100 already, because I know Xiaomi phones drop in price quite quickly and stay there, especially since the Xiaomi Redmi 5 Plus, when I reviewed it, was at around 100, or I mean 220, 200 euros, and now it's already available for 140 or so, so price heavily drops. And I expect this to be pretty much the best phone if you want a smaller one at around 100 euros. So still a little bit higher, but overall a very solid phone, because nothing really disappoints. There is no weak spot. The build quality is nice, it feels good, the display is solid, the sound is good, and even the performance, especially with the 3GB version, will be better. Battery life was fully convincing. The software is something that you have to get used to. There is a Band 20 version also available already. Camera for a budget, quite good. So if you want a smaller phone, I can easily recommend this. If you want a smaller, the bigger version, just get the Redmi 5 Plus. And I think, especially now with a 2x1 display, this is kind of the one to go for. There might be some that are quite close in terms of price, but Xiaomi is a very solid brand. You get a good product without any bigger issues, and so many other Chinese phones that I've reviewed, imported ones, usually sound great on paper but turn out to be a little bit disappointing in reality. This one absolutely turned out actually the opposite, because I did not expect the 720p display to be good enough, and it was. The only thing that I've found a little bit annoying is that since it's 720p and out of the box you can't change the DPI font, is just a little bit too big. You would have to root for that, but otherwise solid phone. I like it. Of course, you can get something noticeably better, especially if you want 1080p, maybe 4K and so on if you get something slightly higher, but also usually bigger. That's the only thing. If you want something smaller, this is one of the few really good ones. That's it. Until next time.